Yes. Okay. We are live. Happy Saturday morning to you, everybody. If you're watching this live, well, nobody is yet because I didn't tell anybody we were doing it. It's a surprise. You'll be in a moment. People will start joining us and they'll see that I've got the great Tim Wise sitting here with me. I said, Tim, I really been bugging Tim to talk. And I said, could you just put on your best hoodie? I'll put on my best hoodie.
Yeah.
And we'll just Saturday morning it. And he said, yeah, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you. I would have worn the hoodie regardless, because that's pretty much my leisure wear when I'm sitting around the house on a cold Saturday morning or even a warm Saturday morning. It doesn't matter. I'm pretty much going to be in the hoodie. If it's summer, I've got the AC cranked, I'm wearing the hoodie. If it's winter, it's cold, I've got the hoodie. It's nice to not have to actually go into to work. And well, you go to your studio. You get to go to your studio. It's sort of nice. You can dress how you like, right?
Well, yes and no. I feel like you're fucking BSing me a little bit because I've seen you on other shows. I've seen you on television. I've seen you at conferences. I've seen you in other interviews. I feel like you dress with the equal amount of respect that you have for the host.
Oh, that's not true. No. Well, when I'm doing a Zoom, I will dress like this pretty much all the time. Now, if it's a speech for a conference, yeah, of course, right. But no, when I do Don Lemon's YouTube show, I wear a hoodie. I think I had a hoodie on Joy Reid's.
Okay. All right. So
all of you equally. So yes, absolutely.
I did not realize. I'm going to go try to find that. If anybody can find that.
I think that's right. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to feel like a real schmuck. But I'll wear a nice collared shirt for you next time.
Are there some other shows that you do like kind of regularly? Like I try to get you every month. I'd take you every week, but I try not to take advantage of people for free work.
No one that often. Don's had me on, I think 3 times. Joy's had me on a couple of times since she started her show.
I wonder about that. I sometimes wonder about your demand. I'm like, why? Like you're one of my audience's favorite guests, and you're always good as a guest, as we're about to prove when we get into it here. I'm making small talk. Yeah. But I sometimes I wonder what that is. I don't know why you're not maybe you're not willing to do it. Maybe you don't put yourself out there.
I'm very willing to do it. I think there are people, we go in waves. I was on everything in about 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, that period. And then, folks move on, right, to the younger. I
don't know. I don't think there's so many. I frankly don't think there's very many people in your lane, if you will. Let me lower yourself to that kind of lingo that we're now living with, because there's so many lanes. I think I use it, but I think
maybe that's what it is. There are so many lanes, right? That as a result, the options people have for what they can tune into, who they could have on as a guest, they could just go on Twitch and watch Hassan Piker talk for 9 hours if they want to, right? And so when you've got a lot of progressive voices, or even for that matter, right wingers who have their right wing voices, there's so many now, right?
I understand. This is the final thing I'll say. No disrespect to anyone else. Frankly, there's some really, really great, passionate, articulate, brilliant, young people on the internet saying things, but none of them can hold a candle to you, not even close, because you have a historical perspective on it and a scholarly approach. And if that wasn't enough, the way that you communicate is far better than pretty much any of them. And they're all editing this shit out of themselves. I rarely edit Tim. Now I put everybody through an AI, mostly to take out my dumb stammering and stuttering. But you're just so much better than all these guys. Now, to get to, though, another point about you is, I think maybe sometimes people, producers, bookers, hosts, pigeonhole you as a race guy. You're an expert on race, but I mean, I think every time we talk about gender and any of these other kind of identities, intersectionality, history, but I'll also just talk to you. I plan today to ask you about a couple things that had nothing to do with that, because I always going to get your take on things. So to me, you're one of the best guests I could have to talk about almost anything.
Well, I appreciate that. I do think you're right. I think that bookers on shows, CNN, MS Now, or whatever it's called now, all of those, right, are definitely, they do say, well, you're not a general contributor. You're not one of our general contributors. Therefore, we don't care what you have to say about the boat strikes, in the Caribbean, or we don't care, what you have to say about, whatever, tariffs or whatever, because you're not that guy. Now, they can have, 15 other people on their shows who are not experts on any of those things, but who have an opinion on them, and that's okay. But then those of us who
no, it's actually not okay, because I'm part of that problem and always have been and will continue to be, gladly. But the point is, because by the way, I think this is somewhat true to a certain extent. If a big platform or network invites you on, generally speaking, go. Because even if you feel dirty about it, you're going to bring people back to where you are. And in my case, I got, if I went on some awful place and then people came over and watched me with you, then I win. We win.
The only time I never turned anything down, the only time I ever turned a big opportunity down was back when Tucker had his Fox show and he wanted to have me on.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, if they're not good faith, if they edit, I
wasn't going to do it.
But no, I was saying, as being part of the problem. The other quality I didn't afford to you, because it was hard for me to say, is you're also very, very funny. And the point being, if you go on cable or on any of these segments, if it's me or you, you're 9 times out of 10, you're going to be better. And only on 1 or 2 things might I have an edge on Tim, but probably even not, because when you go on to do 2-3 minutes, even if it was an issue you had no credibility or knowledge of, all you need to do is read a few articles and then be able to deduce them and regurgitate them in cable news fashion. You can do that as well as anybody. You would have a hard time maybe tightening something up, but you would do it. You do it. And so if it were on these boat strikes, I absolutely would rather get your take on it than some other general contributor's take on it. Because you're going to be original and thoughtful and smart and funny and historical and credible and look at it from a vantage point that one of these other contributors wouldn't. So you should be on commenting on everything that I or other people are unfortunately asked to comment on.
I think I need that whole riff that you just did as a blurb on my website, or I need to walk around with that like as a placard. That was very kind of you.
It's a weird thing, because it's hard to get through to break down a producer, a booker's idea. And it's been a good thing for me, because sometimes they think like, if we got to talk about like comedians and free speech or something, there's only these 3 guys.
Right.
And I'm one of them. Or even like with audience warm up, I was so much in that lane on the comedy politics shows. They're like, there's only 3 guys. And I'm just like, there's a ton of other people. And by the way, a lot of them aren't in my category. But in this case, to you, that's what I feel about you, which is a good way of getting into asking you about some of these other issues that aren't necessarily about race. Obviously, I want to talk to you about the obvious, the Somali nonsense, horrifying stuff. And yesterday, our commander and thief got rid of free admission to parks for MLK Day and Juneteenth, and made free admission for parks on his birthday, which is the most outrageous caricature. We're going to get to those 2 in a moment. I'm sure Tim has plenty to say about them, but I did want to ask you about your feeling on these boat strikes. And the reason why I want to ask you about it is because you and I were talking back during the Iraq war, during the Afghan war. We talked about torture. We talked about war crimes. You can speak to that. And I just think this is such a horrifying thing that is continuing to happen, that we're blowing up, I think, unarmed boats. We don't know who they are. And then we're killing them if they're still there swimming, shipwrecked, and I just wanted to get, your take on the philosophy behind that, and the fact that a certain percentage of Americans have no problem with that. They also didn't have a problem with torture, which I think is different, but still, what are your thoughts?
Well, our DUI defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, is a mass murderer. That's what I think. I think the president of the United States is a mass murderer, not even a war criminal, because we're not at war. There's no declaration. You can't be a war criminal when there's no war. The fact that you say you're at war with people doesn't mean this is not an actual armed conflict. It is not recognized as such. It has not been authorized as such. And so this isn't a war crime. This is just mass murder. That's what this is. This is Pete Hegseth wanting to turn, the world's stage into some kind of video game. And Donald Trump all too happy to let that happen. And let's be clear, this is not unconnected to race, because you and I both know that there is no way in hell that they would bomb boats. If there were, crafty Nova Scotian fishermen who were bringing fentanyl into the United States, right? Coming around, the edge of the country, and coming in and bringing fentanyl from Canada. There's no way in hell that they're going to be bombed. They might be arrested. They might be stopped. They might be prosecuted, but they're not going to be bombed. This is what we do to brown people and or black people. It is something we do only to those who we view as fundamentally inferior to us. The reality is that the vast majority of fentanyl in this country and other drugs, especially fentanyl, is being cooked up right here in the United States. Right? We're not going to go bomb. We didn't go bomb, the rural areas where they were cooking up meth when meth was the big thing in the early 2000s. We didn't do that. This is the kind of thing that we only reserve for people who we believe to be inferior, and there is a color-based scheme to that. So, it's mass murder, for which these individuals ought to be prosecuted, not just for war crimes in The Hague, but literally by whatever international body or national body could be used to prosecute them, and not just for war crimes, but for actual homicide. That's what this is. It's sadistic, and they take a pleasure in it. That is so. This is the thing that I think is so troubling. It's one thing to believe that the drug problem requires a militaristic response. I think that's absurd, but we could have a conversation about that as a matter of public policy. But whether it's this or whether it's immigration, where again, you can have a more restrictive view about what our immigration policy needs to be, we can have a conversation about that. But when you take a sadistic glee in harming people, when you take, yesterday, I don't know if you saw the clip. This is the only way I can interpret it. Tom Homan was speaking at a Turning Point event, I think it was. And he said something, which I don't happen to believe that he believes, but he said in front of these Turning Point folks, that's Charlie Kirk's old organization, said that he doesn't want anybody to get hurt, whether that's ICE officers or quote unquote illegals. And somebody yelled out from the audience that he was a traitor. Now, I have to assume that that's because he said he didn't want quote unquote illegals to be hurt either. In other words, how dare you care whether we hurt them? The sadism of Stephen Miller, Nazi Ferratu, who only comes out at night when the sun is down from his crypt that's why they're building the East Wing, I think, to allow for him to have this ballroom is for him to have a place for him and I don't know what you call, it's not a coven when it's vampires. I don't know what it is, but what a gaggle of a pride.
Well, it's got to be high. It have to be high ceilings so that he can sleep at night as he hangs from them upside down because he's back.
And they have to have very good blackout shades. I don't know what they're going to do with those big ass windows that they're constructing, but in any event, the sadism that he manifests every time he opens his mouth, it's not just that he views things differently, perhaps from how we do, clearly, but he just takes such glee in hurting people, as do those TPUSA folks with Tom Homan, as I think Pete Hegseth does. That's the part that I wish Americans would understand. We can have disagreements about policy. That's how politics operates. It's fine, right?
Well,
but there's a difference between disagreeing on policy and disagreeing on the fundamental ways that we ought to treat. When you drag children away from their mothers and they're screaming in the street, when you launch a raid on an apartment building in Chicago and bring children out in the middle of the night, half naked, and put them in cars for hours before you figure out, oh, there's actually nobody here that's broken any law. That's just sadism. And that's the kind of thing that I would hope that all reasonable conservatives, even people that voted for Donald Trump, which I find it horribly unreasonable choice, but still, I would hope, and I would imagine that there are people who voted for Donald Trump who, when they say they didn't vote for this, even though in effect they did, maybe they didn't realize they were. Well, now they do. They should have been paying attention. The rest of us knew it. And now the question is, what are they going to do about this sadist in chief and his sadistic minions running around doing this, treating other human beings like garbage?
You've used the word sadist or some version of it, sadism, sadistic, so many times that it seems that you are branding a certain ideology and type of person as a sadist. And the definition is the tendency to derive pleasure from the pain or suffering from others. And I looked up synonyms to it, and the truth is there isn't a word better than it. So the point being, this is how they should be branded, and this is how we should talk about them. And I wonder if they would even, if the people who are sadists would deny it, because I was going to ask you about this idea before you gave it the name, which is perfect, because of the comments that Megyn Kelly made about, I don't know if you heard that. She's one of the most influential people in talk. She should be said. She's on corporate media, SiriusXM, my old place. And she talked about wanting to watch these guys bleed out and suffer.
Right.
And
again, why do you have to go there? Again, Megyn Kelly, of course, this is someone who also, reminded us that both Santa and Jesus were white back in the day. So we know what to think about her.
But let me just get you to answer this specifically, because we don't need to give her any credit. These people that are on the radio are just tapping into the sadism that exists in our country. So my question to you is, what is that? What percentage of it? Because that is a strain, a quality that you need to have, I believe, to support someone like Donald Trump, because he's a terribly mean person who also seems to derive pleasure from.
I think, on the one hand, I think that the percentage of Americans who are really bought into a sadistic kind of mentality is the minority. I certainly hope I'm right about that. But I think that if you're trying to market yourself, you're trying to, you're doing rage bait, clickbait, trying to get eyeballs, listeners, make money, which is what Megyn Kelly's doing. It's what all these people are doing. They get paid. The more outrageous they are, the more money they're going to make. They know that even if that percentage of Americans who's truly sadistic, let's say the hardcore of the Trump base, right, which are really bought into that kind of mentality, even if it were only 25% of the American population, you can make a lot of bank off 25% of the American population. You can keep their eyeballs glued by making them angry, by tapping into that sort of lizard brain part of all of us, right? That non-evolved part, which is just about in the amygdala, the fear receptors of our brain, right? The idea that it's not executive function of the brain. It's the part of the brain that responds to threat, that responds to fear. And that's what she's doing. Because keep in mind, this is somebody whose politics, she's the one, she had nothing but criticism for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said all kinds of horrible things about her back in the day in 2016. This is somebody who's just like Tucker Carlson. They've all moved where the money is, and where the money is in rage and sadism and saying the most outrageous thing in order to get the eyeballs and the ears of the listening public. And so I don't know whether it's genuine, and I don't know what's worse. I don't know whether it's worse to really be a sadist or just play a sadist on the radio.
Oh, it's worse. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll help.
Yeah. What's worse?
It's way worse to not be one, but to make money as one. Like, I always question how people earn a living. I judge everybody, including myself, on how you earn a living and the humanity or lack of humanity or what you're doing to contribute to society in your life in any way. If you're making it, I know a lot of people feel guilty about how they make money, and so in a lot of their free time, they volunteer, or they give a lot of that money away, whatever. But this is one of the worst possible things you can do is fan the flames of hate and sadism and rage to make money, to divide people, to get votes. But that's what they have always.
Especially if you don't even believe it, right? I think that actually is objectively worse. I was being a little disingenuous when I said I didn't know. I think it is worse, and it takes me back. I think I may have told you this story before. Years ago, I used to. Back in the day, I had a habit of debating Dinesh D'Souza on college campuses. Yeah. I don't know why I did this, but I was building my name recognition, and he already had it, and so I probably in some ways was taking advantage of him. I was also beating him time after time after time.
Right,
so that
was
but the last time that we debated it wasn't even really a debate. It was more of a panel at the University of Minnesota. We were brought in by the South Asian Students Association, and we were on a panel. And afterward, and we had gone at each other at that point for, 6 or 7 years, at least once a year, 8 times in all. And, and this was before Dinesh went on the birther stuff with Obama. This is before, he's definitely gotten more reactionary. But even back then, he was saying horrible things. He had just published The End of Racism, which is a book that basically says, among other things, that slave owners treated slaves pretty well because, after all, they were their property, that kind of stuff. Or saying things like, black people need to close the civilizational gap with whites before they're really worthy of equality. So he was saying horribly racist things, and I was going after him in these debates, and it was pretty contentious. I certainly didn't consider him a buddy, but we got back to the hotel, and we both had to talk to the clerk at the front desk for some reason. And I was just being polite with him, making small talk. And he said, Tim, you and I really ought to figure out a way to take this on the road. Like, just go to the Ivy League schools where they'll pay us really big money. It was like he wanted to make it a traveling road show.
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment, and then I thought back to the time before that we had debated at the University of Oregon Law School. And afterward, I had throttled him so badly that one of the conservative students, or a couple of them, came up afterward and they were like, why do you do this? This is what they said to him.
Yeah.
Why do you do these? And he said, well, I think it's very important to come and support conservatives beleaguered on these liberal campuses. And they were like, please don't, you're not helping. So he knows that he's losing these debates. And I'm not trying to say that as some point of pride or ego, like he's just not very good at the form, but he's losing and he doesn't care, right? He's getting paid. And he's getting paid very handsomely. Yeah. And he's willing to act like we're buddies. And as soon as the cameras are off, or as soon as the audience is filed out of the auditorium, it's like, hey, buddy, want to go on tour with me? We'll make a lot of money together. And I remember being horrified because at that point, somebody had asked me, do you think Dinesh believes all this bullshit, or is it just an act? And I thought he believed it, but I don't know. And that scares me about, if I don't know, I would rather deal. I would rather deal, I'll be honest, with Nick Fuentes, who I think is an honest, dyed-in-the-wool Nazi, than somebody who just pretends. Nick is not pretending, because he started that shit in the dorm room at Boston University or whatever when nobody was listening to him, and he's still saying it. He is authentic and dangerous as hell, but he's not disingenuous.
I firmly believe that. Said differently, just slightly differently, or as a point, like he says things that he knows is going to get him deplatformed and demonetized because he believes them. And it's the antithesis of saying something you don't believe to make money. Don Bongino apparently was on with Sean Hannity, who kind of, I guess, called him out, which is weird, and asked him why when he did his old radio show or his podcast, why did he talk about the pipe bomber, make all these things up about the suspected pipe bomber. And I believe, I'm trying to find it now, but Bongino said, I was paid to lie.
He said I was paid for my opinion. He didn't quite say, but it's just like that. Read between the lines. He's basically saying I was paid to say whatever my audience wanted to hear. I didn't have to actually do research. I didn't have to look.
And therein lies the problem, a huge problem in my mind that I've diagnosed over and over and tried to, which is that the right-wing media guys say whatever they want, and it creates an ideology, and then it creates a candidate. And then that candidate, Ron Johnson, for example, in Wisconsin, becomes a senator. And then that senator who loved this radio show and became this person because of Mark Levin goes on Mark Levin's show, and Mark Levin yells at him for not being able to govern. And it's because Ron Johnson is trying to point out the difference. It's different to govern or to be in government than to be on the radio saying shit that has no consequences but to divide and get ratings. And then they can't get the job done, i.e. Don Bongino in government right now. And now he's got egg in his face, or I guess he doesn't, because who gives a shit about this whole pipe bomb thing and everything else.
Right. No, I think that's the crux of the problem. And so getting back to the sadism piece, what we have is a cultural problem in not so much between left and right. This is only tangentially about that. This is really about the character of the conversations that we have in the country, and the need for this ever increasing level of rage and hostility. And I will be honest, I know that I've contributed to it at times. We all have contributed. We've all fed into that sort of rage machine. It's very rare that a person doesn't. Because in an environment where you don't get attention unless you raise your voice, you don't get attention unless you come up with the snappy one-liner or whatever it is, you end up playing that game. But I think at some point, and it needs to happen very soon, we're going to have to figure out a way to get back to having real conversations, actual discussions, the kind of stuff, if you recall, when Jon Stewart went after Tucker and whoever it was years ago, before John was even as big as he is now, on what was it, Crossfire, right? This was back in 2004, whatever it was, 2005. And he said, you guys are just, what are you doing? You're destroying America. You're just this whole format of yelling at each other for ratings. And that was 20 years ago, or however long ago it's been.
2004. Yep.
2004. And it's only gotten infinitely worse in part because of the technologies that help make it worse and I think bring out our worst instincts,
Yeah.
but also because we just haven't been able to have a conversation about the humility that it takes to actually govern a country.
So
The humility that it takes to act, it takes humility to interact with your neighbor if you're doing it right. It takes humility to take care of your kids. It takes humility to do just about anything that's worth doing. And yet in this country, we don't believe in that. And we're led by a guy who is the avatar for whatever the opposite of humility is, right? And a guy who has made it clear from the time that he was a young man in business that the only goal was to crush his adversaries and his competitors. His dad taught him that, and that was his mentality in business, and he's brought that into the governing of the country. That is what is poisoning the culture. It's that mentality that it is absolutely zero sum, that there's no way that we can do what's best for the whole country. In fact, Donald Trump basically makes it clear that the only polls he cares about are the polls that show how he's polling with Republicans, with those who voted for him. If you didn't vote for him, he doesn't care what your view is. As long as his ratings with Republicans are in the 90s or high 80s at the very least, then he's okay because everyone else is an enemy. Everyone else is an adversary.
Just to put a finer point, it's more insidious than that. If you don't support him and like him and speak highly of him, you might as well be dead to him. And he doesn't care if you are dead, whether you're a citizen or a cabinet secretary.
Like literally, if you don't fluff him in the cabinet meeting, I mean, that's literally what he needs, is to be fluffed literally every time that he's got his people around him.
I also just want to say one more thing about the media points and how the rage has incentivized the algorithm. I just want to be clear that progressives are just as guilty of performing it, and just as people on the left, and just as guilty of consuming it. I am always there for a clip that says Tim Wise destroys Ben Shapiro. And so is every other liberal minded. We want to see, and what that's doing to us is really important, because I just had something. I'm not at all bothered by this, but I think it's illustrative of what we're talking about. This guy, Aaron Parnas, I don't like this kid. I don't know anything about him, but he's got a massive following on social media. And I think he works with the Midas Touch guys. And the thing I don't like is the way that he posts without attribution to anything. Yeah. And increasingly that's becoming more common. And maybe I'm too old school, but I try to, as much as I can. And if I don't, I wouldn't argue in my defense that I shouldn't have attribute whoever, journalists especially, much less other artists. Right. And so I simply, I quoted one of his posts and I said, this guy's got a problem attributing journalists and outlets, and you should just fix it. It's not hard to do. Just give them credit. And Tim, he then responded, which gave it traction from all of his people. The reaction, people were so hateful to me. You're a piece of shit. I used to like you. It was so specific. And I was like, whoa, what is happening? He wasn't outraged, and I wasn't outraged. He and I could have a thoughtful discussion about why you should do that or not. And he could make it, but his people came from my family. And I'm like,
that's nuts.
So I'm saying to everybody listening, and I just want to hear your thoughts on it. Obviously, don't become that. If someone attacks me or Tim, or criticizes us, you do not need to threaten their family.
No, yeah, that's sort of basic, right? No, absolutely.
I'm being hyperbolic in that case. No one threatened my family with the Aaron Parnas thing, but I mean, they're like, I used to like you, and what's wrong with you, piece of shit? Just horrible shit.
Yeah. No, I think that is something that we are all sort of addicted to, the dopamine rush of, the hot take or the clever meme or the video that says so-and-so destroys so-and-so or whatever else. And I'm sure we all get a little rush when we see our side owning the maggots or whatever, just like they do the same when they own the libs. There's this guy that I enjoy. He's funny. He's clever, but I sort of hate watch him also. He's this young kid. I don't know his name. He's on the left, and he does all these Instagram and TikTok videos basically from his car, where he's just screaming from the car, right? He's just like, and another thing, you fucking blah, blah. And he just is cussing the whole time. It's pretty funny. And he's very clever, and he speaks really quickly, and I appreciate his cadence. but it's totally not helpful, right? Like it's totally not productive, I don't think. So I just watch him and I realize like, oh my God, he's getting all these folks really amped up. But the question is, what are they really doing after they see this rage-filled video? Are they really going to go out and do anything? Are they going to read a book? Are they going to go out and organize in their community? Or are they just going to think about, and now there's like 7 of them. They proliferate. Now there's like 7 others who do these rage videos from their car. I don't know about you. I've never had the impulse to like just go sit in my car. It's not moving when they're doing it. They just like go into their driveway and they yell at the dashboard, right?
Let's talk. Listen, whatever else we're going to talk about or not going to talk about, because the only thing I want to talk about is people making rage videos in their car.
Yeah.
And kudos to those who did it first and are still doing it.
Yeah.
But it's not just rage videos. It's all videos, always in your car. I don't know what it's about. I'm self-conscious. I made a video recently of a commentary of just me for 2 minutes. I had 2 solid minutes of thoughts on something while I was walking, and I tried to make it a little funny, whatever. And I'm self-conscious of doing that more.
Yeah.
But I'm even more self-conscious in general of being performative in any way. I'm always performing. Don't get me wrong. I'm always performing, but I like being too performative or being in such a way that seems disingenuous, fake, or phony.
Yeah.
I, as a comic and a human,
that
makes me cringe when people are doing kind of that screaming, like they must have rehearsed it, and
yes.
You can tell when it's authentic, and
it's got to be rehearsed, and they've got to have. There's no way that these folks that do this in their car as fluidly and eloquently as they're doing it don't have something. They are looking at some app that is doing like a scroll. They've got to be reading a text. There's no way that they memorize this. I don't believe for 1 minute, because it's not edited. I'm watching it. It's not.
Oh no, it's
but I do worry about like, what are these? If I walked out of my house and sat in my car and just started screaming, I think the neighbors would call the cops. Or if I went to like the Costco parking lot and I'm yelling at the, like, that cannot be the sum total of our politic, right?
I'm sorry, but you could wake up, be half asleep, Tim Wise, and do a better 5 or 10 minute rant, much less 2 minute rant, than almost everybody we watch. So the fact that you don't do it is actually the problem. Like, we're criticizing and making fun of people who do it. Meanwhile, the best of the best is like, nah, I don't want to make any videos and post them.
Too special. Yeah, I'm too special.
I mean, you don't have to be in your car. Tim, we'll take you anywhere. We'll build you a rage stage if you want, because you actually are credible and good at it. And by the way, don't need a fucking, that's why I think you're such one of the greatest guests. You're so good at talking. That's why people love to book you to speak and so on. You're real good at it. And yet you don't have like a massive TikTok, whatever, Instagram. You should be doing these 2 minute videos every day about fucking everything. And I always say that to you on and off the air, because there's so many lesser, weaker people, including me, doing it. I'm here every day, but usually platforming someone like or similar to you. So, okay. Got to ask you about a couple things. What is the state of the MAGA movement? How are you referring to it? We see this fracture. We see this divide. I'm calling it hoods off. Somewhere you inspired me, probably with that. But like, from what we've seen and what you've seen of the American right and covered it your entire career and life, and me too, we've seen a lot of changes. Now there is a fracture, I believe, and a lot of other smart people, I think, do as well. How are you seeing it? What terminology would you use? Where do you see it going? I would call it, by the way, to be a little bit more specific, the kind of Nick Fuentes hoods off. And the phrase I'm using that I think is most accurate is not Nazi or fascist, but Christian white nationalist or Christian white supremacist. That's what he's leading. And then I'm not going to call them establishment Republicans, but basically the rest of MAGA is how I would call that, or the conservative movement in general. What do you think's happening right now on the right?
I think you're right. I mean, I think that this has always been a movement that I think was motivated largely by white nationalism or Christian nationalism, among other things. But I think that the divide now is very clear. They have gone all in as sort of the Afrikaner party. at this point, both literally and figuratively, right? They are essentially capitulating to the worst impulses of the worst people in the coalition. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone who ever voted for Donald Trump is a white nationalist or a Christian supremacist. I don't believe that. If you've been with him since 2016 and you were an early adopter and you're still with him, then I think there's a pretty good chance you might be in that crew. But I realize there are people who are just incredibly, by their own admission, low information voters who don't really understand how inflation works, who don't understand how the price of gas gets set or eggs, and who might have gone out and voted for him thinking he was going to help the economy. If you're still believing that, then my guess is it was never about the eggs or the gas. There are people who were jumping off of that train. The polls certainly suggest that. Some of the more recent elections certainly suggest that. We just had a special election here in Tennessee, in Nashville, in a district that unfortunately I am not in. It's just down the road. The Trump 22 district is now went for the Republican by only 9 points. That happened because a bunch of the counties that are part of that district shifted to the Democrat. And that includes counties that are still very Republican, but there are people in those counties that are like, yeah, this is not working out the way we thought it was going to work out. So I do want to differentiate between those people and the hardcore, but the hardcore of the MAGA base absolutely, positively are more in the Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson camp, the far, far right, the white nationalist, Christian nationalist camp, than they are, the Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, tariff camp. That's not really their thing. The only reason that those folks might like tariffs is because they can stick it to brown people around the world primarily. So even for them, that's race and that's culture. But I suspect that this is what the right has done. This is the David Dukification of the Republican Party. And as someone who was involved in the defeat of the actual David Duke 30 years ago, it really pains me to acknowledge that David Duke lost that election, but won the larger war, because now what the Republican Party is saying in its MAGA version is precisely the kind of stuff, and actually more extreme than what David Duke was saying in 1990 and 91, when he was still having to play games and he was still having to, downplay the white supremacy and act as though that wasn't who he was. And now here you've got a president who is calling entire swaths of the country garbage because they happen to be from Somalia, or saying we're going to revoke, the favored status for Haitians and kick them out and keep them from coming. And we're going to keep all the trash people, quote unquote, out of the country. And now they have State Department documents worried about the de-whitening of Europe. I mean, they're just openly saying these things now in ways that no Republican Party candidates or leaders in the last 30 or 40 years had been doing. They're not dog whistling anymore. This is all bullhorn politics, shouting it from the rooftops. And I think that's what Democrats have got to come to acknowledge. That's who the enemy is at this point. This is not Bob Dole. This is not Jack Kemp. This is not Ronald Reagan. This is not even Newt Gingrich in his 1994 version. It is a politic that is far more noxious and poisonous than that.
The white Christian nationalist, my friend Will Judy in the chat, who runs Secular Houston, great organization. If anybody's in Texas, calls it Christo-fascist. I just don't like the word fascist because I think people don't know what it means. And I think it's easier to say white Christian supremacist. Anybody can figure that one out. And also it's very, I see the movement as very kind of Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, Gilead kind of, that's what they want. And we need to include words that signify that they're also marginalizing women. They don't want women to vote or have reproductive rights. So white Christian nationalist works for me, but it's also really important to be clear. The attack on black and brown people is so overt every day. And someone somewhere must have a clearinghouse or spreadsheet of all of the overt white Christian nationalists that work in the federal government now, from DHS to ICE to the Department of Commerce. I mean,
well, I don't have a full list, but I did want to mention, I work for African American Policy Forum, and we have just released a report this month called "Anti-Blackness is the Point: Racism, Misogyny, and Donald Trump's Assault on Equal Opportunity." And folks can get that at the AAPF website. And what we do in that report is we actually document the 4 pillars of anti-blackness that are so obvious in this particular moment. The first of them being the obviously racist rhetoric that is used against black people in positions of leadership, especially black women. So it's both racism and misogyny, together, what Moya Bailey calls misogynoir. And so there's this overt rhetoric that is used. It was used against Kamala Harris, calling her low IQ, which of course is the slur that Donald Trump uses for Jasmine Crockett, pretty much any black woman. It's the, but it's also the attack on, the removal of CQ Brown from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's the removal of Lloyd Austin and the replacement with Pete Hegseth. All of it based on the idea that those were DEI hires. So now we got to get back to merit, right? The rhetoric of these people aren't qualified. So that's the first step, is the rhetoric of anti-blackness. The second that we talk about is the assault on DEI, both in the public sector and private sector, threatening companies, threatening schools that have any kind of DEI with lawsuits if they continue, which is leading to a massive scaling back of DEI efforts, some of which didn't even really start until 2020, after the uprising that summer after George Floyd was murdered. So we talk about and we document that. The third is the assault on the civil service. A lot of folks think that the attack on federal employment is just a typical sort of conservative attack on big government, but notice the departments that are specifically being targeted. Department of Education, HHS. These are departments that have a disproportionate share of black employees, particularly black women. And when you assault the structure of government, given the racialization of public employment over the last 40 and 50 years, the public perception of government is that it serves, quote unquote, those people. The public perception is those are the people who work in it. And of course, disproportionately, it is black folks and brown folk who you will find in the state sector because of discrimination in the private sector over decades and generations, which has disproportionately led them to be in civil service. So when you attack that, it's not just trying to reduce the size of government. You are actually assaulting black opportunity. There are 300,000 black women who lost their jobs between January and August because of the combination of the attack on civil service and federal employment and the attack on DEI disproportionately. So that's a third pillar of anti-blackness. And the fourth is, of course, the assault on black history and black memory, whether that's K-12 book bans, whether that's the Naval Academy banning books by black authors and also by some white authors like myself that talk about racism, whether it's the removal of artifacts and narratives and exhibits from museums like the Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. All of those four pillars combined demonstrate that this racism is not just generic and it's not just some sort of free-floating thing. Anti-blackness is, as the report says, the point. It is the motivating force behind a lot of what Donald Trump does and what this administration does. And it's best summed up by Darren Beatty, who is Undersecretary of State for, I think, Public Diplomacy or Public Information. It's in the report. I can't recall the exact title. But he was appointed by this administration, and he is on record last year before the election saying that if you want things to work, you have to have competent white men in charge. That is an official in the Trump administration who says that. So that's what these folks are about. They're not hiding it. And our report documents with all the receipts the extent of this anti-blackness. So I'd encourage folks to get it and spread it widely.
I just shared it for people watching on the screen, and you can go to aapf.org and download the PDF, and then you can read about it. It's really well done. Of course, Tim is a senior fellow there. It's a great organization. But the answer to my question was kind of this report that your organization put out answers all of the questions about why closing the parks, free admission to parks on MLK and Juneteenth, the way he talks, but more importantly, the policies, the erasure of history, especially. It's so audacious and effective. It's effective, I think, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. We document in the report, for instance, speaking of public parks, the removal of true descriptions of history in those parks. There's several examples that we give where, Harper's Ferry, the Harper's Ferry Monument in West Virginia, where they just want to take out the part about John Brown fighting racism and slavery. Well, if you take that out, there's not much left. Or the administration sending a letter to the Boston African American History Museum, which is part of the African Meeting House, which is a place that Frederick Douglass spoke when he was alive, and William Lloyd Garrison spoke there, and escaped enslaved persons would be housed there and protected there. And they received a letter from this administration shortly after it took over, saying that I think it was a $500,000 grant that had been offered by the federal government to help support the museum was being yanked because it no longer served the interest of the United States or the priorities of the Trump administration. So, I mean, that is the kind of thing and that's not accidental.
Right.
Erasing history why would they do that? Why would we want to erase history? Two reasons. Number one is because if we acknowledge the history, we have to acknowledge that much of what we've learned about our country has been inaccurate. That's one obvious reason that we don't want to deal with the horrors of white supremacy, enslavement, segregation, lynching, etc. But the bigger reason is that if you learn about history, you learn about those injustices, you also learn about the people who fought back, and you learn about the resistance strategies that they used. I believe, for instance, the attack on the African American History Museum and Culture Museum in DC is not so much that they don't want white kids to be offended or feel bad about the history of white racism. I don't think they want Black and brown kids, or white kids for that matter, to recognize that there's a way to fight back against autocracy, that there's a way to fight back against white supremacy. Because when you go to that museum is not a compendium of oppression. That museum is a testament to perseverance. That museum is a testament to meritocracy, Black excellence. It is a testament to Black folks and non-Black allies of Black folks fighting back and surviving against all odds. And that's what they don't want people to see. So that's why they want to erase the history, because if people learn that history, they might mimic it and fight back against the nonsense that's happening now.
Yeah, mostly talking about Black Americans, African American policy. What's F stand for?
What's that?
What's your organization?
Oh, African American Policy Forum. Yeah.
Forgive me. But I just want to ask you before we leave, what about the attack on brown people, specifically like targeting them and pulling them out of their cars and chasing them and anywhere that they work? And you're just seeing it every single day. It's very, very focused on, I would say, the Latino, Hispanic.
Well, it is. But here's the thing, and this is something that needs to be pointed out too. Where did this country get the idea that chasing down people and removing them or snatching them up was a legitimate public policy? That too is rooted in anti-Blackness. It's rooted in fugitive slave laws. It's rooted in the tradition of slave catchers. And by the way, even though only 5% of undocumented people in this country are Black, would be considered Black, 20% of people who have been deported by this administration so far have been Black. So even there is a disproportionate attack on Black folks. And even people who are not Black who are being attacked are suffering for the history of othering, which anti-Blackness has always been, right? The idea that there's white people and there's everybody else, that is rooted in a history of anti-Blackness, which is why it's so important for Black and brown folk to make common cause and fight back along with white allies against this larger system of white supremacy, because it's all rooted in the idea that there are real Americans and there's everybody else. And the real Americans in their mind are the ones who were considered Americans when the Naturalization Act of 1790 was passed, which said free white persons and only free white persons could be citizens of the United States. That is what they want to take us back to. That is what they have always believed. Before we leave, because I know we're running short on time, but I want to mention one other thing, AAPF thing, that I want folks to know about, especially if you are in New York on Monday evening, or if you know people who are, please let them know. This is the 11th anniversary of the Say Her Name the Lives That Should Have Been performance. It's a staged reading that's being done with these incredible actors. This is the 11th time that we've done it. It is an annual gathering, a fundraiser on December 8th, an evening of artivism, storytelling, and ritual to honor the lives of Black women who have been killed by law enforcement. A lot of times we talk about, reasonably so, Black men who have been disproportionately affected by police violence. We forget about the disproportionate number of Black women who also have been. And so we're doing, as we have done now 10 other years, it's a 90-minute staged reading of essentially the stories of some of these women and the mothers of these women, talking about what would have happened had their lives not been taken. And so you can go to the show. It's going to be at the Atlantic Theater Company, Linda Gross Theater in Manhattan on 20th on Monday night. The doors are going to open. It's 336 West 20th Street, Atlantic Theater Company in New York. Doors are going to open at 6:30. You can get your tickets on Eventbrite. I sent you the link if you want to, if you can potentially share that. It should be in your email. It's going to be an amazing evening where we're going to really sort of re-envision and reimagine the story of these women whose lives were cut short if they had not been. And it's just a powerful night of artivism and just lifting up these stories. So if you're in New York, please, by all means, come out and see the show.
Very cool. I will share the link in the show notes. which this will be up by Monday, and I think I will go. I think I might go.
Please do, and tell everybody that you know to come out, because I really it's just an incredible opportunity to see some really, first of all, some really good actors who are going to be doing this. We've got Tony Award winning actor Kara Young is going to be the MC. Got some incredible folks, and every year it's just really powerful. So the more people that come out, the better.
Is there an opportunity, self-interested question, to schmooze and connect with people, or to even interview people?
Possibly, yeah. I would imagine. I haven't really thought about it, but I would think so. Yeah.
Maybe put me in touch with somebody. I'll touch you after. But like, if there's any way for I'd like to connect and
Yeah, I mean, some of the and the great thing is some of the mothers of these women whose lives were lost are going to be there. And so, and they come to these events. Wow. and yeah, so it's very powerful. And
now I don't want to go.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. It's a lot.
No,
right?
I'm doing a new thing. I haven't really talked about it so much, a little bit, but I'm like leaning into other people's suffering, because I've avoided other people's suffering, and that has only created when my suffering is worse, and it helps me. So it helps me feel better when I'm not avoiding it and leaning into. So I joke, the joke is I don't want to be around suffering people, but the truth is I'm actually trying to, I always did avoid it. And now I'm trying not to avoid it.
And what's amazing about this reading and the presence of these moms who will be there is their fortitude, their resolve, not only to uphold their children's lives, their daughters' lives, right, but also just to be part of this both healing and activist network moving forward, and reminding us not only, hey, I lost a loved one, which you can understand anyone who loses a loved one wanting to do that, but also wanting to connect that memory to a larger struggle and a larger movement, and to not forget that we still have a significant problem of police violence against folks of color, particularly Black folks, and not just Black men, but also Black women who sometimes get dropped out of the frame. And so we just want to take this opportunity, as we do every year. This will be, as I said, the 11th year, to really to hold that up and to remind folks that there's a lot of work still to be done in this area.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm going to see if there's any way if I can cover it as media and promote it and share it. I will definitely reach out to your people there. Tim, always great having you here. See, we can talk about anything, and we should probably invite Tim and others on, have a little bit more fun too with some of the other inane things. Like I don't know if you're a member of Costco, but I feel like there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, it's funny. I tried to sign up to start being a member of Costco this last year, and I was trying to do it online, and it glitched on me, and then I was like, I was too lazy to just drive across town and do it, but I am going to do it. My plan is to do it because it would save me a lot of money.
Okay, that's huge news, because as you go through it and as you experience it, I want to document it for people. Your girls are old and independent now, like mine, living alone, and so going to Costco, it's like, is this a place for a one-person household? I feel it might not be, but I will argue that it is. But I want to see what your experience is, and I don't know how much chicken you eat, but
I just want to go. I just want to try it. There are some things that I really need to have a lot of. There are a lot of things I don't. But I just want to go for the experience. I think the gas probably. Of course, the problem is it's the other side of town, so the gas that I'll waste to get over there might.
You don't have to. At least here, you don't have to. People don't know this. You don't have to be a member to get that sweet Costco gas.
Is that right? See, I didn't know.
I mean, here you don't. Here you don't. Yeah.
Maybe.
So,
well, I'll let you know if I get that membership, if I can figure out how to do it. My problem is whenever I'm online and something glitches, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm done. I give up. I give up. It's like when we were trying to get on earlier, your audience doesn't know this, but the thing was glitching, and I almost just said, fuck it, I don't even want to talk to Pete today. We can't make the technology. I'm done. I don't know. Screw it. I'm going to go back to bed. I don't know. I do want to come back. I do want to come back soon and talk to you. The one thing we didn't get to talk about, but I want to talk about, because I feel like I need to talk about it, is the last week I've spent writing a victim impact statement for the court that I'm going to be reading at the sentencing hearing of one of these white supremacists who had me marked for assassination. She's taken a guilty plea, and she's going to be sentenced this month. her co-defendants are fighting the charges. They're going to go to trial in 2026. But I had to come up with a victim statement that I'm going to read at her sentencing. She's going to be going away for 25 to 30. And I've been sort of laboring to figure out, like, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it? What is the message I want to offer, both for my own sort of peace of mind and healing, right? But also because I have this ridiculous belief in the power of my own persuasion, which probably people like you puff up because you tell me how incredibly good I am with words. And so there's part of me that's like, surely I can give this Nazi something to think about in the next 30 years that'll transform her life. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And I don't even care. I have to say certain things for me, regardless of the effect it has on her. But I would love to talk about the process of writing this statement and what it means to have to go into court and talk to someone who had had solicited my murder, like literally solicited mine, and not just mine, a couple dozen other people. We had, kill cards with our houses, pictures of our homes, our addresses, our faces. What's that like,
That is, I did see you posting something about that publicly and that you were working on it and struggling with it. And I would like to talk with you about it, but not until I know more about the situation and until you kind of come up with it. The only thing I would say is, like everything else that you do, I think when it's done publicly or transparently, like you're doing this in hopes to maybe get through to her and for yourself, as you said. But like if the statement were public, which it will be, if you want it to be, it's a potentially maybe a violence interrupter for someone else who might go down that path. Listen, there's real penalties for these things you do. And more importantly, I'm sure your words are going to have to do with a deeper context there. And so I think it might be something that is not only good for you and this woman, but also for the rest of us to understand motivations and maybe even prevent someone from going down that path. So
that's my hope, and I certainly will. I pretty much have it completed now. I can't obviously publish it publicly until I've delivered it to the court. Once I've done that, right, which should happen in the next couple of weeks, I am going to be publishing it, and then we can come on and talk about it. Because I agree. I think that would be the mistake she made was, well, first of all, threatening to kill people's a mistake, but threatening somebody who can, in fact, as a writer, put something together that could be influential was a huge error on her part, because it means that I'll be able to reach, potentially as many people as more people than they were. So
is it a situation where you actually read it in court?
Yeah, I'm going to read it in court. I'm going to do it over Zoom. It'll be done. The trial is in Sacramento, and I'm not going to go to Sacramento for it, but I will Zoom in and read it.
Yeah. Well, we all want to know more about this. Is it true that you want to give the exclusive to your victim statement to Don Lemon and not me?
No, I'll give it to you. I'll be happy to give it to you. I mean, I'm gonna publish it, of course, but I'll talk to you about it first. I will make you that promise.
What an unbelievably fucked up thing for me to say, but I felt it, so I said it.
Yeah,
Tim, it's great, and I really do want to hear more about that. And I hope that, I wish you nothing but peace and how you find your way through that. And the whole experience is really profoundly dramatic, and I'm sure emotionally affects you and a lot of other people.
It's been surreal, especially and because we do like to be funny on this in these conversations. It's especially fun. I don't know whether this makes it just more hilarious or absurd, or whether it makes it sort of pathetic. But the two people who were the principal people who were threatening, who were behind this group, it's called Terrorgram Collective. Folks can go and look up who they were. The guy who's fighting the charges, in addition to being a Nazi, which is, interesting, is also a DJ in Idaho and apparently gay. So a gay Nazi DJ, who I guess when he's not threatening to kill people is spinning Bronski beat for people in the club. And the woman who is taking the plea, who I've written this statement for, among other things, a few years ago was making a living reviewing dildos online and selling.
Wow.
So I have a dildo saleswoman and a gay DJ who wanted me and a bunch of other people, U.S. senator, a mayor of a major city, dead. I don't know whether that's funnier, more absurd, or more pathetic. Like if I was going to be threatened by a Nazi, I would hope it was like some big hulking skinhead with a lot of tats. You know,
But
not the guy who's like, and next find young cannibals. You know, I mean, I don't know.
But even that guy has some interest in his life that is the antithesis to whatever he's projecting outwards. Like even that guy might be very much into Smurf dolls or any other kind of weird cosplay. But I do. It's so weird that that woman did that, because I'm actually, the reason why I have to let you go, I'm doing a dildo review segment.
Excellent.
And my guest for that is in the wings.
Excellent.
So,
well, enjoy that. It's going to be great, I'm sure.
Come on in, Gary. Why is he in my apartment? Hold on, I'm not done with Tim. Dildo reviews coming up next, folks. I think you're going to like what we have today. It's going to be a lot different from the last one. Tim Wise, excellent. So grateful. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for watching live. Listen to the podcast where Tim will appear on the Monday episode. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick for me. And go follow and support everything Tim's doing, especially AAPF. The African American Policy Forum, where Tim's a senior fellow. It's an amazing organization. Really, really great group to support. Tim, thank you, and goodbye, everybody.
You bet. Take care.
I don't know how to get out. Still here. I lost my screen. Hi, everybody. I'm still here. It's not weird. Good to have you. Tim's gone. Oh, good. Tim left. He didn't have to endure that awkwardness of me just being here alone. Oh, man, that was awesome. Shit, I didn't know about those, the victim statement thing or the situation. I think I saw him posting about that. All right, coming up, the Dildo Review Show is really exciting today because a lot of the dildos that we'll be reviewing aren't actually, they weren't made as dildos. They're just phallic objects that people use a lot that you wouldn't expect. So we're going to have a wooden dowel that is, like something like a towel rack or even a railing. And then we also have, oh my God, I see him setting them up over there. That's just a screwdriver. Damn. Oof. And yeah, I don't use any of these, by the way, but I'm not against them for men or women. Whatever you want to put in you is up to you. Although be careful, because yeah, we're going to see some of these in the emergency room, according to Dr. Will Judy. My friend Will is an ER doctor, but my other friend, I think I told you this, Will, was a ER doctor back in the day. I know a few people who are ER doctors, and he said a woman came in with the cucumber stuck. His words were in her snatch, which I don't use that phrase, but a cucumber was stuck in her vagina. And he said that they couldn't get it out with like suction, I guess. Do you have a machine that does that? But they had to put like a balloon between her vaginal wall and the cucumber and then inflate the balloon. It broke the seal and it came out. And that is a story about me and my ass. All right, everybody. Bye. Thanks.